students, welcome back. Let us continue with the discussion pertaining to conditioning. In the previous discussion, I talked about in detail about classical conditioning coined by Ivan Pavlov. Today, I will talk about another two theories, that is instrumental conditioning and social learning. So, let us start with instrumental or operant conditioning. It is also known as operant conditioning, which was coined by B.F. Skinner. And according to this theory, it has been indicated that when any response operates on the environment, it has its own consequences. It has positive or negative impact. Any child who performs scores top score in the classroom, scores first rank, it has a positive consequence. On the other hand, any child who has failed, who could not go to the next standard, maybe it has its own consequences. But ultimately, the point is that whatever kind of response we are making in the environment, it has its consequence in the way that either it will be repeated or it will be terminated. This is the gist of instrumental conditioning. So, in nutshell, it says that any behavior that is considered to be desirable is rewarded and strengthens the behavior that it will be repeated in future. If any behavior which is considered undesirable and is punished, it will be avoided, the person will escape or will terminate that response or event, so that the response should not occur in future again. So, according to instrumental conditioning is a form of learning which behavior is maintained or changed through consequences. If it is rewarded, it will be maintained because it will repeat. If it is punished, then it will change. Now, change here means it will be terminated. Either the response will be terminated or the event or stimulus will be terminated from the situation. It is a form of learning through which organisms learn to repeat behaviors that yield positive outcomes in form of reward or permit them to avoid or escape from negative outcomes. As I gave you the example that if you touch any live wire accidentally, we will try to escape. How we will escape? We will tend to remove that wire, we will cover that wire, live wire, right. Or you have broken the traffic rules, you are breaching the traffic rules, the cop will fine you maybe 5,000 rupees and you will learn. So, the point is we will try to omit that response from that environment. So, this form of learning occurs through rewards and punishment for behavior, and that the strength of the behavior is modified by reinforcement or punishment. So, any behavior which is desirable is reinforced, that means it is repeated, it is encouraged. Any behavior that is undesirable is punished and it will not be performed again. Therefore, reinforcement is the main element of instrumental conditioning, which strengthens behavior and increases the likelihood that it will be repeated. So, reinforcement means encouragement that the behavior will be repeated. So, what is reinforcement? It is a favorable outcome presented after the behavior, making the response more likely to occur again. Child who is performing well in the class is being rewarded, then definitely the child is reinforced to perform the same behavior. Similarly, any young boy who has breached the traffic rule, he has been fined, he is being punished and he will not repeat that behavior. So, again there is sense of desirability and undesirability. So, this is reinforcement. But what is positive reinforcement? A positive reinforcement is a stimulus or an event that when it follows a response increases the likelihood that the response will be made again. I will continue with the example of the child. When he is rewarded in the class for scoring highest rank, again situation will call for the repetition of the behavior to work hard and maintain the highest rank in the classroom. So, this is positive reinforcement. Negative reinforcement is that any situation where the response has been punished, then that stimulus or situation will be avoided, so that the response should not be repeated again. So, negative reinforcement is a behavior modification technique that involves removing or avoiding any unpleasant stimulus to increase the likelihood of a desired behavior. For example, the live wire. When you remove the live wire, then definitely the behavior will not occur again that you are touching it. So, stimulus to increase the likelihood of a desired behavior means desired behavior is not to touch the live wire. So, this is about negative reinforcement, because that the pain you have experienced in touching the live wire will force you to perform another behavior where you are covering the live wire, and the desired behavior is not to touch it and cover it. This is negative reinforcement. So, the word negative refers to the fact that the response causes termination of an event. When you are punished or when you are in any situation, you know if you respond this in a particular way, you will be punished, you will escape that stimulus or event. So, negative reinforcers are often painful or noxious. For example, another example can be that when any child whose exams are near, maybe the parents will switch off the TV. So, this is a negative reinforcement to perform the desired behavior. So, what is the desired behavior? To focus on the studies. So, this is negative reinforcement, so that the desired behavior is performed. Desired behavior is not to perform the wrong behavior. So, how this conditioning works in work settings? Employees who consistently meet project deadlines may be granted additional break time as a reward. The extra break time serves as a negative reinforcement, motivating employees to maintain their punctuality and productivity. So, giving them break to perform the right behavior, not giving the break because they will not perform. So, this is about the equation between the response and the situation, so that the desired behavior is being performed at that moment. Suppose a team successfully completes a project ahead of the schedule. As a result, their managers cancel a scheduled meeting, giving them an unexpected break. So, the cancellation of the meeting acts as a negative reinforcement, encouraging the team to continue the efficient work. Now, there are two aspects. Since the team has already performed the task before time, so the manager has cancelled the meeting. This can be a pressure on the team also, that if they will not perform, then maybe they will have to attend another meeting after long working hours. So, here the point is that no matter whether the team has managed to successfully complete the project ahead of schedule and the meeting has been cancelled, it is about pressure that was maintained on the project team, and ultimately they could waive off that pressure by completing it before time, and the meeting was cancelled. So, this is negative reinforcement, where you are trying to avoid any painful, stressful situation. The cancellation of the meeting acts as a negative reinforcement, encouraging the team to continue their efficient work. So, now they have association that once you are punctual, once you are productive, then the boss can also give you some freedom. So, this is the pressure that was maintained on employees. Another example can be an authority figure such as a teacher or supervisor withholds criticism when an individual follows instructions correctly. By abstaining from providing negative feedback or criticism, the person reinforces the desired behavior of following instructions and increasing the likelihood of it being repeated in future. Repeated in future means not to be criticized by the supervisor. So, he will try to follow the instructions of the supervisor, so that the negative reinforcement, that is the criticism, can be avoided. Similarly, at workplaces, that you come to the office on time, leave the office on time, within that time frame you are completing your task, that will be avoidance of negative reinforcement, because there will be criticism. A commissioned salesperson wanting to earn a sizable income finds that doing so is contingent on generating high sales in his or her territory. So, what is a negative reinforcement here? That if he will not meet the target of selling maximum product in his territory, maybe he will not be commissioned, he will not get the commission. So, getting the commission is the negative reinforcer in terms of making more efforts to sell the products. So, this is negative reinforcement or positive reinforcement that works at work in different forms. Now, the point is, even based on these simple examples, it is very evident that these theories are very much operational in our day-to-day life. Just to avoid any criticism, we tend to indulge in the right pattern of behavior, be it completing the task before schedule, be it performing the task to an extent that you tend to get the maximum commission on selling the maximum number of products. So, these, by not facing the loss, we will engage in a behavior so that the commission is drawn to us and the loss is away. So, you are eliminating the loss factor, only focusing or performing a behavior which will help you to incur profits. So, this is instrumental conditioning or operant conditioning. The other is social learning theory. This is a theory of social behavior that proposes that new behaviors can be acquired by observing and imitating others. I gave you a very small example that when a child is exposed to some violent pictures, the child will tend to imitate or observe violent behavior, and he will also indulge in some actions of violence. On the other hand, if the child is exposed to some subtle pictures where garden is there, kids are dancing, they are playing some music, the child will also try to imitate the same subtle cordial behavior. So, this states that learning is a cognitive process. Why cognitive process? Because when we are exposed to any situation, our perception, thinking, memory all works in concert, where we try to give meaning to that situation based on our own perception and understanding of the situation, and then we tend to imitate or observe as per our desire. So, it is a cognitive process that takes place in social context and occur purely through observation or direct instruction, even in the absence of motor reproduction or direct reinforcement. No matter whether we will be reinforced or not, based on our own cognition, based on our understanding, based on our perception, thinking and feeling, we will try to imitate and observe that behavior. This is social learning theory. In addition to the observation of behavior, learning also occurs through the observation of rewards and punishment, known as vicarious reinforcement. When we see other person performing behavior being reinforced, we try to observe and imitate, that the child will also learn the same thing, or even at workplaces. And when it is observed that any behavior has been punished, then that also makes an understanding based on the cognitive process of that person that I will also not perform this behavior, because such kind of behaviors are not reinforced, rather they are punished. For example, any employee who indulges in some counterproductive work behaviors like stealing, theft, performing any unethical behavior, or using internet services for their own personal uses, and they are being punished for that, that observation will give an understanding to other person not to engage in these type of behaviors. Whereas, to help others, being rewarded for being more cooperative and supportive employees, and they are being rewarded for their cooperative behavior, then the other employees, based on their observation and understanding, they also tend to perform those kind of behavior. So, this kind of observation of reward and punishment is vicarious reinforcement. So, when a particular behavior is rewarded regularly, it will most likely to persist, and if a particular behavior is constantly punished, it will most likely desist. This is so obvious. So, any individual's employee behavior which is regularly rewarded from time to time, he will maintain that behavior. If not, he will try to desist. So, the influence of model is central to the social learning viewpoint. That means, when we are observing someone in the environment, so there is one model which is the main crux of social learning theory, that whenever any model is there whose behavior is being regularly rewarded, he becomes a model for the right behavior. Anyone's behavior who has been punished, that becomes a model for a punished behavior. So, in both the cases, model is there which is central to social learning theory. So, based on this observation, Bandura in the year 1963 has determined of the process that influence the model will have on an individual. That means, every model behavior, be it punished or rewarded behavior, model is there, how it has an influence on the other person. So, he has given 4 processes that any individual will indulge in a process, will involve in a process, and how he or she, based on his observation, will imitate the behavior. The first process is attentional process, retention process, a motor reproduction process, and reinforcement process. First, process involved in social learning. Attention is impacted by the characteristics of the observer, for example, perceptual abilities, cognitive abilities, arousal or past performance. When we tend to observe any model, so it also impacts the emotional psychological aspect of the observer as well, and the characteristics of the event. For example, to what extent it is relevant, whether it is something new that you have encountered, and what is the value of that situation. People learn from a model only when they tend to recognize and pay attention to its critical features. Critical features here means to what extent the model is new, to what extent the model has some different characteristics, to what extent the observer can relate those characteristics to himself as well as to the situation or event, and we tend to be most influenced by models that are attractive, repeatedly available, important to us or similar to us in our estimation. So, the more we are easily relating ourselves to the model based on recognition, based on attention, the more focus we make on that model. Now, that model can perform any desirable behavior or undesirable behavior, that is a different aspect, but to what extent we are getting attracted to the model, that is the first stage of social learning theory. The other is retention. Once we have focused, we have recognized the model, to what extent we are ready to perform or imitate the observed behavior of the model. So, the observer must be able to remember the features of the behavior, and this process is significantly influenced by observing observer characteristics, particularly cognitive abilities and the practice of cognitive rehearsal. Now, the point is, when we are already attracted to the model, how much we are rehearsing, we are actually remembering those characteristics and behavioral pattern of the model, and we are ready to perform it. How we will perform? The more we practice, the more we rehearse, the more the behavior will be apparent. The more an individual engages in cognitive rehearsal, the better they can remember and reproduce the observed behavior, empowering them in their learning process. So, the point is, once you have recognized that model in the environment, we are attracted to it, we will observe the behavior, and to what extent we are practicing those behaviors, so that we can reproduce the same behavior and we are empowering them ourselves. Basically, we are empowering ourselves to fit into that role model. This is about retention, but you will enter this situation only when we have the capacity to remember those characteristics of the model. So, the first is attention, retention, and motor reproduction, observing the new behavior and then performing it. So, this demonstrates that the individual can perform the modeled activities, and this can require the input of others to provide self-correcting feedback and improve performance, fostering a sense of support and community in the learning process. That means, when you are ready to perform physically or through your motor capabilities, then we also require some kind of feedback, so that we will come to know whether the performance of the behavior was accurate or not, or to what extent more improvement is required. So, this is about fostering any good behavior and not encouraging bad behavior. So, this leads to sense of support and community. Now, this kind of behavior can also be replicated at workplaces, that what kind of training you are into and whether the training is effective or not, that will come based on feedback mechanism at workplaces. You have learned, you have been mentored, you have a coach, and then when you perform those activities, to what extent you are polished enough to perform that activity, that we will come to know through feedback. So, that fosters a sense of reward when the feedback is positive. And the last is reinforcement process or motivation. When the individuals are motivated to exhibit the modeled behavior, if positive incentives or rewards are provided, and behaviors that are positively reinforced are given more attention, learned better and performed more often. So, even at workplaces, when you are performing those mentored behaviors, the more they are being appreciated, the more positive feedback you receive, the more you are motivated to perform again and again, and that becomes a pattern of behavior. We acquire some patterns of behavior, we stabilize with them and perform better in future. So, these are the 4 processes which is involved in social learning, that is attentional process, retention, motor reproduction process and reinforcement or motivation. So, even social learning is present in the workplace. Who hasn't learned skills by observing or imitating the colleagues? Definitely we have people, whenever we are new at workplaces, we do not know what to do, what is our role and responsibility. But how we have to perform even our role and responsibility, that we learn not only through our training that an employee receives while joining any organization, but at the same time it is through observation or imitation also. So, this kind of social learning occurs at workplaces in some form. The first is mentoring or coaching. The premise is that an employee is assigned a role model, usually a colleague or a line manager who has more experience in the topic that needs to be learned by the apprentice. Apprentice here means any new employee who joins, he joins at the position of apprentice, who is not a regular, but who is a trainee to learn the ropes of his profession. So, he is being assigned, he is being associated with the mentor or the coach, so that the apprentice learn different ways to perform the role and responsibility. And with the gradual process of interaction, observation and imitation, the roles and behaviors are being learnt by the apprentice. The other is workshops and internal training. Training sessions conducted by employees who are experts in a given subject towards other employees. So, learning is focused on collaborative tasks. For example, when a team is being formed, so there are different people who come with different and highest expertise. They conduct workshops, training programs for the other members, so that they learn how to meet the objective with new skills, and that gives a chance to all the other team members to observe and imitate the experts and then perform the task accordingly. So, this is about social learning, that it is not only at social level or societal level, this kind of social learning also exists in workplaces. The other is on the job training. This is the most common way to understand social learning theory, where employees are familiarized with the working environment they have become part. Employees gets hand on experience in using different machinery, tools, materials, and they are being associated with experts, so that they can understand the challenges that they will face in working in that same environment. And during that training, they understand the patterns of behavior and how to deal with people, how to deal with different challenges, and then they are mentored through verbal or written instructions and demonstrations and pass on the knowledge to the new entrants. This is the objective of on the job training, but ultimately the psychological aspect is that this kind of training, mentoring, coaching is being performed based on the psychological process of observation and imitation. When there is some attraction based on the expertise the other person has, they try to remember the mechanism of the job that they have to perform. They perform it physically based on their motor skills or dexterity, and then they are being given feedback which leads to motivation or demotivation. So, therefore, learning takes place on the job, and managers are concerned with how they can teach employees to behave in ways that benefits the organization. So, this is shaping social learning is one of the theory of shaping behavior, which has a logical approach towards achieving the desired behavior. Definitely, any new apprentice or employee will never have any idea how to, or expertise or experience how to use any machine. Only an expert, mentor or coach can only give them that understanding, how to understand the logic of using any machine, what are the pros and cons, to what extent you can be safe enough to use any particular machine. So, this is all about social learning theory. Next is shaping a managerial tool. Now, we have used a theoretical aspect based on theories, learning theories given by Thorndike, classical conditioning, principles, laws of learning, instrumental conditioning and social learning. Now, there are certain tools also where this kind of learning will take place in a very apparent manner, in a very tangible manner, where we can say that learning has occurred. So, OB professionals have talked about a systematic reinforcing, where every step is being reinforced, so that a desired behavior is being learned and maintained and acquired. For example, an employee who has chronically been a half hour late for work comes in only 20 minutes late, we can reinforce that environment, because that change will not be instant, it will be gradual process. So, even any person who is coming not 30 minutes late, maybe 20 minutes late, even that behavior is being reinforced, because the person is in the process of shaping himself to follow the norm of the organization. So, reinforcement would increase as responses are more closely approximated to the desired behavior. Now, immediately the person will not learn the entire process. He will make some errors, he will make some mistakes, he will make some correct responses also. So, every time the correct response is performed in the whole process, those responses are being reinforced. Just to shape the behavior, the tool, that is schedules of reinforcement, are being used at workplaces. So, they are the rules which state that where instances of behavior will be reinforced in some cases, and behavior might be reinforced every time it occurs. Sometimes a behavior might not be reinforced at all. That means, maybe the person was earlier 30 minutes late, he was punished. Now, he is coming 20 minutes, he is just 20 minutes late, not 30 minutes late. A little bit of reinforcement will be given to his behavior. Maybe after 1 week, the behavior is more better, that he is coming on time. So, another kind of reinforcement will be given to him. So, this is schedule of reinforcement. There are lapses, there are times and intervals, there are ratios, that in what ratio, that if this much of improvement is there, then what should be the ratio of reinforcement. If this much of time is there to improve the behavior, then in how much time the reinforcement should also be given to the employee. So, these are termed as schedules of reinforcement, where instances are being identified, which states that when and where reinforcement has to be given or behavior has to be reinforced, and when not at all. So, a schedule of reinforcement is a component of operant conditioning, also known as instrumental conditioning. So, it is an extension of instrumental conditioning in terms of reinforcement, positive or negative. It consists of an arrangement to determine when to reinforce behavior and when not. For example, whether to reinforce in relation to time or number of responses. As I mentioned, that maybe in what time the person will be reinforced, or based on the quantity, that how, in what ratio the person has changed, and then the behavior will be reinforced. So, there are two types of reinforcement, the continuous reinforcement and the intermittent or partial reinforcement. So, in other words, this is a pre-arrangement plan where responses are sometimes reinforced and sometimes they are not reinforced. If there is no punishment also, then there is no reinforcement also. Therefore, after the response is learned, it can be maintained by the schedule of reinforcement in terms of time, in terms of ratio. Maybe just now I gave you the very simple example, that an employee who was 30 minutes late, now he is just 20 minutes late. Maybe so after some more reinforcement, he will be just 10 minutes late, or he will be on time. So, this is about phases or schedules of reinforcement, in what manner reinforcement will be strengthening the desired behavior. So, we will talk about schedule of reinforcement further in the next session. Thank you so much.